Hello, everyone. It's Amir Kutub here again, and welcome on board to the live session. So today's session is going to be in English, but if you have any questions that you want me to answer in Hindi, just write it in the comments. So the format is pretty simple. Today we are going to answer the most common questions that are asked about a particular startup. So if you have any questions related to startup, feel free to share them in the comment section. If you want me to answer them in Hindi or in any other language that I can speak, then please feel free to add it over there. But generally, I'll be doing this session in English. But at any stage, if you want me to switch to Hindi, happy to do that as well. So the format is pretty simple. I've got some questions that our audience members have already sent, so I'm going to address those questions. But in the meanwhile, feel free to send your questions in the comment section itself. All right. So let's take the first question. This question is, what is the difference between a small business and a startup? It's a very nice question, and a lot of people have this misconception that startups are a form of small business, but that's not true at all. So generally, small businesses are defined as businesses, first of all, who are lifestyle businesses that are restricted or limited to a particular revenue, a particular size. And for the small businesses to grow to a medium or large business, it takes a lot of efforts and especially a lot of time. For example, your cafes, restaurants, these or any of your lifestyle businesses like hospitality businesses do come in the category of small businesses. These businesses are not scalable. Whereas what startup is an initial phase of a scalable, large global business. So startup is not an actual business. Startup is a testing phase. And that's not something that I say. Steve Blank, the father of startup methodology, the lean startup methodology, says that the startup in itself is not a business. A startup is a testing methodology or testing phase for a large business whose business model is not defined. And that's another difference between a small business and a startup. A small business generally works on a defined business model, which means if you are opening a cafe or a restaurant or a small retail shop or a small factory, then there would be someone else following the exact same business model. Whereas when we look at the startups, if you are starting a startup, by just the definition of it, a startup comes with a new idea and a new business model, which means that business model has not been tested in that particular industry, in that particular market. So you are actually going into the market, testing the new business model with your customers, failing the hypothesis, pivoting, and finding the right and correct business model. And that's why there's a huge difference between this small businesses and your startups. Moving forward to the next question, we have got some questions that are coming in the comment section as well. That's good. Sharik has come on board. Say hello, my bro. Hello, Sharik. How are you? Welcome on board. Azam Khan, I want to start up laundry in COVID in India. So Sharik's question is about a laundry startup. That's a great suggestion, a great idea. So you can actually open a laundry startup. The way it's I've actually assisted some of the laundry startups over here in Australia as well. The way it generally works is that you first of all, you need to actually have a physical laundry. If you do not have a physical laundry, then you get in touch with the laundry. Then you are not exactly in the laundry business, but you are actually in a delivery and pickup business where you are developing an application where people could order a pickup or delivery, and then you have to manage that picking up of the clothes and delivering of the clothes. So you are not actually the one who is probably doing the laundry. You are the one who's actually delivering the laundries and picking up the laundries and then managing that particular transaction. शाहरुख खान आज भी वैसे ही जो स्कूल में था, जरा भी चेंज नहीं आया. लाइक अ क्यूट बॉय. थैंक यू सो मच मेरे भाई, आपकी मोहब्बत है. Thanks a lot. We'll take the next question from the previous audiences, and feel free to send your questions in the comment section, as I said earlier. All right, I've got another comment in here. Let's just show that comment. Harshit Raj has the question is on the screen. Harshit Raj has asked, I want to start up an AI startup. So AI, which for my audience, artificial AI refers to artificial intelligence. It's great that you want to start an artificial intelligence startup, but the question that we need to ask before starting a startup or thinking about startup is, what problem are we going to solve? So artificial intelligence got a huge role in solving a lot of problems, but you have to identify a particular industry or a particular use case, a particular problem that could be solved by the use of artificial intelligence. For example, artificial intelligence can help in military, it can help in research, it can help in health, it can help in sports. So you have to identify that what's that particular problem that you are going to solve through artificial intelligence, and then develop a business model from there. So our startup is always about identifying the problem, identifying the need, the challenge, and then identifying a solution for that. And that solution could be through artificial intelligence, that could be through augmented reality, that could be through Internet of Things, and so on. But it's not right to start with the solution first. So you say, I want to do an AI startup, I want to do say an Internet of Things startup, I want to do a tech startup. No, these are all solutions, these are all channels to solve the problem. The very first question that you need to ask before you start a startup is, what problem are you going to solve? The same question that you're going to ask is, whose problem are you going to solve? Once you identify that, that's when you sort of identify how are you going to solve that problem. But if you go other way around, that's where a lot of startups fail, because you think, oh, this technology is cool, how about I start a startup in this thing, and that leads to the failure. The next question is by Shanawaz. If you want to start a business, then what it would be? If I want to start a business, the way I look at this is, and it's in continuance with my earlier comment, I would look at what is that problem that is actually troubling a lot of people. What is that particular need that is causing a huge problem for everyone? For example, recently I did a not-for-profit startup. So when the lockdown happened, everyone was, especially in Australia, everyone was in lockdown. We do not have that much of communication between the neighbors. So there were people in their 80s and 90s who did not have anyone to help them. They could not go out for the groceries or medicines. So I developed an app called Angel Next Door. And the concept of that app was that the people who are not able to go out, or people who need something, they would be able to send a request, and the people around that particular area would receive a notification. Their neighbors would receive a notification, and the neighbors would be able to help them. So what I did by doing this startup was looked at a problem, looked at a challenge, and then tried to solve it through the particular startup. So you don't need to think about, okay, this is the industry that I want to have my startup in. What you need to think about is, what is that problem that's troubling a lot of people? What is that particular need? You just need to look around, even in your industry, or probably in your neighborhood, maybe something in your house. What is that particular problem that's causing a huge issue? For example, I always give this example of Uber. So the taxi industry all around the world was messed up. Like, if you look at the US, if you look in Australia, if you look in India, there were challenges with the taxi industry. People used to call them, they took a lot of time, the customer service was bad, their frequency was not good as well. So there were a lot of issues with the taxi service. So what Uber did was developed a business model to solve this particular problem. But because the problem was so huge, the problem was prominent all around the world, that's why that startup was able to sort of like go global. Similarly, there was a need, there was the challenge that to watch movies, you actually had to rent the DVDs or go and buy the DVDs, and they were pretty expensive, right? No one want to spend like $10 or $20, and in India, like 50 rupees or 100 rupees in buying a DVD or getting a DVD, watching it, or returning it back. It was just very inconvenient. It was very expensive. So Netflix saw this opportunity and solved this problem by creating this web video sharing platform. And this was, again, a problem that was happening all around the world. So whenever I look at a startup, I look at Is that problem big enough? Is that problem here in Australia? Is that problem there in US? Does that problem happens in India as well? So if I look at the problem and the problem is big enough, that's a green signal for me to start a business or start thinking about solving that particular problem. I hope I answered your questions. We'll go to the next question, which is, what are some things that entrepreneurs should know before starting a startup? Well, the very first thing that you should know before starting a startup is that it's very hard. It's very, 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 very hard. It's very challenging, and it's not easy as it seems. Like, we look at rag to riches story, we look at people sort of getting successful. There are no overnight stories. It take a lot of efforts and energy. And it's not just about the idea itself. So people think, oh, I've got a great idea, now I'll just open $1 million startup. It's just about coming up with an idea, creating an app, and once you push it out, it's going to be like you'll be earning millions. It doesn't work like that. Startup journey in itself, the first 2 to 3 years, is actually about discovering the right business model. So you actually have to have a lot of resilience and persistence and determination to be able to do that. So you just have to put all of your focus in your startup and spend 3 years or 2 years in identifying the right business model, doing the customer discovery, doing the customer development after that. And it takes a lot of efforts, it takes a lot of money, it takes a lot of energy as well. So it's not just about idea. You need to educate yourself a lot as well. So if you are thinking of a startup because you are bored of your job, or because you think your job is hard and you're like, my job is hard, why am I earning money for a company when I can earn money for myself? Don't just go into a startup thing because you're just bored of your job or because you're tired of your job, because startup will tire you really badly. It will push you down, beat you down. It will test each and everything. You have to sacrifice your everything. Like, you have to make personal sacrifices, emotional sacrifices, financial sacrifices. You have to sacrifice your relationship with your friends, your relationship with your loved ones. It's going to have an effect on your mental health. It's going to have an effect on your physical health. And that's given. It happens to each and every one. And you have to be patient and resilient enough to go through that journey and then come out and emerge out as victorious. And you're not going to be successful in the first time, because that's the whole startup journey is all about. It's all about failures and learning from those failures. So the basic concept of lean startup methodology is, you put something out, it fails, you learn from that failure, pivot and try something out, push it out again, it fails, and then you learn from there. And that's how you discover your business model. So if you are not willing to fail, if you are not willing to play the long game, startup journey is not for you. And that's probably the most important thing that an entrepreneur should know before going into a startup. All right, so how to gain knowledge about startups? That's an interesting question. So there are a lot of resources that are out there, but I would recommend you the most authentic resources. So Steve Blank is the guy who founded the lean startup methodology that led to the development of all these big startups in Silicon Valley. So look at any startup that's out there, they all have followed the lean startup methodology. It's important that you understand what that lean startup methodology is. So you can actually go to steveblank.com. He's developed a website. It's a very poor website, not done very well. But what he has done in his website is that he has actually added and provided all the resources. The second thing is that you could probably read a few books written by Steve Blank himself and his student, Alexander Osterwalder. I don't think it's this book is pretty much visible on the screen, but this one is like Business Model Generation by Alexander Osterwalder. And Alexander Osterwalder was the guy who actually developed the business model canvas. That's the main blueprint that's being used for all the startups at the moment. So read Alexander Osterwalder, read Steve Blank, and there are a lot of resources apart from them that are actually out there. There's some really amazing writers who have written books on that, and there are a lot of resources that are actually available as well. But whenever you are looking for it, the most important thing to look for is that the keywords are the lean startup methodology and the business model canvas, and hopefully it will cover most of the things. There are a few books that Steve Blank has written. One is 4 Steps to Epiphany, and the second is the Lean Startup book, which is actually written by Alexander Osterwalder, I believe. Yeah. I hope I answered that question. The next one is, how do I know I've got what it takes to be an entrepreneur? Well, the fact is that you don't know until and unless you try. The precursor is the things that you should know about entrepreneurship, as I earlier told in my response to previous question, was that you have to be resilient enough, you have to be persistent, determined, and you should be willing to accept the failures, learn from them, pivot, and try again. That, I believe, is the most important quality of being an entrepreneur. So if you are a good learner, and then you can take that level of emotional, financial stress, and you are willing to fail, you are willing to learn from those failures, then entrepreneurship is for you. But if you are asking this question, how do I know what I have what it takes to be an entrepreneur, then I would say I never knew that I have what it takes to be an entrepreneur. It's just that I thought I'll just give it a try, I'll just give it a try, and I was determined enough and passionate enough to actually see this through. So I just had this belief somewhere in my heart that, if I give it a go, like the worst thing that would happen is that I'll fail and learn something from that. So I was willing to sacrifice a lot of things for it, and I did sacrifice a lot of things. I left my high-paying job back in India, came over here, did a cleaning job. I used to throw newspapers in the night, and did a lot of stuff, left my luxurious life to start from the scratch because I was passionate about building my own startup. So if you have that level of passion, and then it's not just about the passion, if you think that you are willing to learn and you are passionate and persistent and determined enough, then you have what it takes to be an entrepreneur. You don't need to worry about extra knowledge. You will learn the skills, you will develop the skills as you will enter the entrepreneurial space. So you don't need to do an MBA in entrepreneurship or any business course or whatever. You just need to be willing to learn. You just need to come into the open side, because startup in itself is a learning process. So you come up with a hypothesis, you develop a business model canvas, and then you test it with the customers, and then you get customers' feedback. So your customers are your educators and teachers. So I can't be your educator or your teacher. Steve Blank cannot be your educator or your teacher. No entrepreneurial educator can teach you the right skills. They can teach you how to go about developing your startup, but your customers, the market, is the real teacher. And once you go with open eyes and actually take your business model to your customers, they will tell you exactly what they want, and you learn from them, you pivot your business model from there, and then you come up with a new business model. And this is the process of this iterative failing and learning and then implementing it back that makes a startup successful. If you're willing to do it, then definitely the entrepreneurship is for you. The next question is, I'll take the question from the comments. Shanawaz Khan, why do most startup fails? That's right. I believe 98% startups fail. There are few researchers that says 99% startup fail. They fail because they believe, most of them start with a concept that they have got an amazing idea, and they will develop a business model and then just spend a lot of money in developing the product and put it out to the market, but will never listen to the customer feedback. And it's just the human nature, because we think that our idea is amazing, our idea is great, and they'll spend a lot of money on developing something that the market never needed. A startup that would follow a proper lean startup methodology can never fail. The reason it can never fail is because the process of lean startup methodology is actually developing a business model canvas and testing it with the market, listening to the customer feedback, and then developing the startup with the market iteratively. So I'll explain what that means. So, for example, if you think that I'll start a particular business for particular customers, and for example, there was a company called Picasa, I believe. Google already bought. So Picasa started as a gaming company, and they developed online games and put it out to the market. And they initially thought that the people would like gaming, but when they pushed out to the market, what they found was that people were not using it a lot for gaming, but they actually had a feature in their webs in that gaming website to actually add your photographs. People were using that to actually add their photos. So what they did was they actually tweaked their business model. They listened to their customers and developed an extensive photo sharing platform and just cut down their full business model. They started as a gaming company, as a gaming website, and they changed their full business model to a photo sharing website because they listen to their customers. So the way you develop a startup is that you think about a business model, think about, okay, these are going to be my customers, this is going to be the problem that I'm going to solve. And then rather than developing the full product, what you do is you develop an MVP, a minimum viable product. So a minimum viable product is something very basic, something very small that allows you to test your market. For example, if you are thinking of developing an app that will be like a networking app and so on, instead of developing the full application, you would, rather than doing that, you would spend money in developing a simple website or web application that would, or a Google form that would allow you to test that particular hypothesis in your business model and test it with your customers. And once you get a yay or nay from your customers, you tweak your business model from there. So rather than developing the app on the very first day, you would be developing the app with your customers. You would be developing the features with your customers as you are listening to your customers. And if you're developing something with your customers by listening to their feedback, there are very low probabilities that it's going to fail. It's not going to fail. Like if you are developing something with that is actually asked by the market, it cannot fail unless the whole market situation changes automatic, like in one go. So most of the startups fail because they don't follow the lean startup methodology. They are not willing to listen to their customers and test it iteratively. They are willing to listen to themselves. They are rigid about their concept, and then they think that their concept is going to work. They spend a lot of money and they push it out. It doesn't work. It's as simple as that. If you are following the proper lean startup methodology, testing all the hypotheses, your startup cannot fail because of the nature of the way the whole lean startup methodology is set up. All right, so we'll take the next question. I really want to start my own startup, but not able to find a good idea. How do I find it? I've actually done a session specifically on this in terms of how to generate amazing ideas. But a startup idea is basically generated by a big problem or a big need. If you can find an amazing problem, when I say amazing problem, which means the problem that is problem for each and everyone, like that a pain that most of the people feel. If it's not a problem for everyone, and it is a problem for a majority of segment, a majority of people. For example, if it's a problem for all doctors, if it's a problem for all lawyers, if that is a problem for all students, if it's a problem for even maybe all girls between 18 to 24, whatever it is, but you need to find that demographic who has got a particular problem. Once you identify that problem, then it's very easy to sort of come up with a solution from there and then develop a business model. But if you look at it from a different approach, you start with the solution first and then go to the problem, then it's going to be difficult. So if you want to start your own startup, start looking around you. If you're working, start looking in your office. If you are interacting with people, start talking to them and start identifying the problems. What's the problem out there? If you're listening to the news, what's wrong with the news media channels? If you're going on the road, what are the problems that you see on the road? If you're going in the market, what's the problem with the market? If you're doing shopping, what's the problem with the shopping? If you're going to hospital, what's the problem with the hospitals? Try to identify that problem and see if that problem is big enough. And if that problem is big enough, how can we solve it? That's when you can start doing a bit of research. See, if that's a problem in my country, how is US solved it? Or if that's a problem in this particular space, how has people in other industries solved it? So that's when you start doing some research and come up with the solutions and ideas. So once you have a problem, once you have a solution, you can, like, it's easy to develop a business model around that. It's more about finding a problem that's big enough and a solution that actually fits that particular problem. And then I would say it's pretty easy from there. The next one is, how do you know if you are good in entrepreneurship? Well, look, entrepreneurship is like, I would listen to this question as, how do you know if you are a good student? Because entrepreneurship is all about being a student and learning with each and every step more than anything. So entrepreneurship is not about the ideas. Entrepreneurship is not about managing. It's not about execution. It's about being a student, because you are coming with a completely new business model, something that's completely unprecedented, that has never been tested in the world. So when Uber came, did anyone ever tested that business model? No, right? So whenever you come up with this startup idea, which is like truly novel, you don't really know whether that business model is going to work or not. The best that you can do is you can test it in the market, learn from what market says. And that's why being a good entrepreneur is about being a good student and being able to learn from the market insights, doing your due research. So, but again, you wouldn't know if you are good in entrepreneurship or not unless you actually dive deep into the entrepreneurship. So rather than spending, again, investing all your money in startup and just leaving your job to be in a startup, what you could do is, if you can see a problem that you can solve, you can start with a basic business model canvas. So I actually have got a link so if you go to my website, amirkutub.com, AMIRQUTUB.com, there is a link to the business model canvas over there. You can actually download the business model canvas from there, fill out that business model canvas, and then develop a basic minimum viable product, do a bit of customer research, and see if that idea ticks with other people. If that idea ticks with other people, if the business model is correct, then you can sort of go ahead and pursue it. And then you can learn from there. When I started the very first time, 2 of my startups in the beginning actually failed. So it's not about being a good entrepreneur. It's about being a good learner. So what can you learn from the failures, and how can you grow in your life is probably the most important thing. What is a working day in the life of CEO like? That's interesting. So again, there are 2 types of CEOs here. One is a startup CEO, and one is CEO of established large organization. So a life of a startup CEO is very different from an established CEO, because as a startup CEO, you are doing everything. So it's basically, you are a founder. So you are a janitor, you are, swiping the floors, doing each and everything, right? So the life of a founder or a CEO it's very messy actually. And it has no structure to it, because you're running a lot of errands. You're looking at the marketing, you are looking at what's happening in the sales, you are maintaining and managing the product direction as well, you are looking at the technical stuff as well. So you're just managing a lot of things. And on the top of that, you are meeting your potential investors, you are meeting stakeholders, you are addressing media as well. So it's very chaotic. However, with the CEO of an established organization, for example, Enterprise Monkey is not a startup, it's more of a medium to large organization. And my life in there is very structured. So one of the main jobs for me is to actually ensure that each and every department is performing its responsibilities properly. So sales and marketing is performing its responsibilities properly. The technical department is doing fine. The accounting department is doing fine as well. So just having that an eagle's eye view of each and every department in my organization, whether that's performing well or not. Am I meeting the objectives of my board or the business objectives? So So what happens is that the board actually creates an overall strategy, and set up the targets. And as a CEO, you actually have to ensure that your organization is meeting your targets. It could be your delivery targets, could be your sales target, and so on. So you are not the one who's actually achieving those targets. Your team who's actually achieving your targets. You have to ensure and measure and manage that we are achieving those targets. One of the major responsibilities that I see is that whenever I see a leak or a gap or a problem, it's my duty to ensure that I can fix that leak or problem in a more permanent way. So it could be due to a process gap, or it could be due to a process miss. So I try to identify what's the exact problem, and then if there's a process gap, then I try to develop and improve the process. If there's a process miss, then I try to implement countermeasures to ensure that those process misses doesn't happen again. But I would say that my life as a CEO is very structured, and the way I have structured my business, and it's different. Like if you're working for a company that's not your own, it's different, because although I'm a CEO of my company, but I don't spend more than 2 hours on the management of my company, because that's the way I have set up my company. I've got all my systems are automated. All of my duties and responsibilities are automated. So I just have to spend a couple of hours just seeing what's happening, and probably attending a few meetings, but that's it, because I don't like to do a lot of work. That's why I started my business. I did a lot of work establishing the business, failing, and blah blah blah, but I think sort of I've reached to the level where I don't have to do a lot of work. So I can spend like 2 hours a day, and that's it, and I can be anywhere in the world and manage my business without managing it. So it's like observe my business without actually doing anything. Next question is, why do entrepreneurs feel lonely sometimes? Because it is a lonely journey, especially if you are just by yourself and you don't have any founders. Then the thing is that, first of all, you are working on a business model that has never been tested and tried before you. It's not like opening a cafe, because there are a lot of other cafe owners and you can talk to them and they can relate to you and understand your problem and share your challenges as well. But when you are a startup, your business model is unique, so your problems and challenges are unique, and you don't know the answer to them, right? So you have to actually figure those answers out with your customers. So there are a lot of unknowns in the startup. That's the big problem. And the second is that you are alone in terms of, because you do not have any co-founders. Even if you have co-founders, you just have like your 1 or 2 people. The people who are working for you, they look up to you to make those decisions, right? So they are getting paid, or they're on salary, or they might have an equity, but you are the one responsible for making the decisions. So I felt very lonely being an entrepreneur, because it was my responsibility to ensure that the salary of the employees are being paid on time. It was my responsibility that the customers' requirements are delivered on time as well. So if my team is not doing the work properly, ultimately I'm the one who's going to take the hit. If my clients are not paying my invoices, ultimately I'm the one who's going to take the hit. So it's like you have to take the hits from all the side. And it's a very lonely thing, but it teaches you a lot. And that's why I say, if you do not have that level of madness to actually be in entrepreneurship, don't worry about it, because it is definitely a very stressful journey. It actually has a lot of effect on your emotional and personal health and physical health, and you have to show a lot of resilience and go through a lot of ups and downs before you become successful in your startup. So not for the faint-hearted, for sure. And it is definitely a very lonely journey. We look at the fame, we look at all those success stories, and we think this startup thing is so sexy, so great, but it's not. It's very, very painful. Although the thing is, because the startups that I work with, or the startups that I found, are the ones that I'm really passionate about. Even then, when there's lots of pain and everything, I enjoy it. It's like a sports player, who's already injured and everything, but he's sort of still playing, still in the field, not because because he has to. It's because he enjoys it. Similarly for me, it's not because I want to earn money. It's not because I want to be famous. It's not because I want to prove a point to someone. It's just because I'm doing what I love to do, and that is the thing that actually drives me. I actually had an opportunity to work with Steve Wozniak, the co-founder of Apple, pretty closely. And I asked him, how did Apple and did you become such a big company? And did you ever think that like Apple would be such a big, huge company? And what he said was that I was never interested in making a lot of money. I was never interested in making founding such a big company. I was only interested in making good computers. That's it. Steve Wozniak was an amazing computer engineer. His passion was making computers. He used to love them, and that's why working with Steve Jobs, he was so successful in developing such a huge organization. All right, so we have got some comments from the people. So we have got Willie. Boo, Lakers still the best in the basketball, dude. That's right. What else have we got in here? What questions do the investors ask before investing in your startup? That's a good one. So investors ask 5 questions before they invest in your startup. Number 1, what problem are you solving? What is it exactly that you are solving? Number 2, whose problem are you solving? Who are your customers? And you can't say everyone is my customer. You have to identify specifically who are your target customers. Number 3, who are your competitors, right? And you can't say no one is my competitor, right? There should be a competitor. Even if you're developing a completely new business model, then there would be some people or some businesses that would be affected by your business coming up. So who are your competitors? Number 4 is, for example, I'll give you an example. If you are developing a vaccine for COVID and there's no competitors, no one is developing it, and you say, oh, I'm developing this is something that's unique, but I do not have any competitors. But the fact is that you still are competing with the organizations who are actually getting benefit out of the COVID, who are sort of developing medicines for the symptoms to treat COVID as well. So because once you have developed the vaccination for COVID, the need for those treatment medicine would go off. So there's always a competitor. Number 4 is, how are you better than your competitors? Are you better than them? Are you faster than them? Are you cheaper than them? And it's not just simple or easy to say that I'm just cheaper than my competitors. Because if you can sell something in a cheaper sort of way with your competitors, then someone else can come up with a cheaper idea as well. So it's not just about competing on the price. You actually have to identify whether you are faster or whether you are quicker, or whether you are better than your customers, than your competitors, including being sort of like competitive. And the final question is, how are you going to make money? That's the 5th question. What is your business model? And that's where your business model canvas sort of comes into play. Very important that you download the business model canvas. It's on my website, amirkutub.com. If you search business model canvas on Google, you will find it as well. Very important that you fill that business model canvas. And from that business model canvas, you develop a pitch that actually answers all of these questions. And then you go to the investor. Sorry, one point that I missed about investors is that they need to see an exit strategy, because they are not going to invest in a business that doesn't have an exit strategy. Because it either needs to be that you're going to sell this business to another company, a big company, or you're going for an IPO, which is initial public offering, which means you will take this company public. But they need to see, if they are investing in your company and if they are buying shares of your company, how will they be able to sell it in 20 times or 30 times in next 4 or 5 years. The next one is, what are the best ways to think of ideas for a startup? And I'll probably conclude at this one. So, I think we have already taken this one, so we won't worry about this one. So thanks a lot for following me and attending this amazing session. In our next session, we'll cover some more questions on startups. If you haven't followed me on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, please follow me, and LinkedIn as well. And if you have any further questions with relates to the startups, feel free to ask them in the comment section. I would be more than happy to answer them. Take care. Goodbye. Thank you.